The void between stars had always been silent, indifferent to cold, uncaring expanse where civilizations rose and fell like sparks in a hurricane. But then came the Cathar hegemony, a vast ancient empire built on conquest, hierarchy, and the unshakable belief that they were the apex of evolution. They'd crushed countless species beneath their armored boots, absorbed weaker cultures into their machine, and watched entire worlds burn without blinking. To them, humanity was just another primitive anomaly barely spacefaring, squabbling over scraps, clinging to a blue-green marble on the edge of nowhere. When their scouts first detected Earth's radio chatter, they didn't even send a warship. Just a single observation drone, cloaked and silent, hovering beyond the moon like a god judging ants. They watched as humans argued over borders, poisoned their own oceans, launched fragile metal birds into orbit with explosive fury. The Cathar laughed. Or at least their equivalent of laughter, a low, resonant hum of condescension that echoed through their command chambers. They lack unity, the high strategist declared. No discipline, no vision. They will shatter under pressure. And so, when the hegemony finally arrived, not with diplomacy, but with annihilation, they expected surrender within days. Instead, they got something they couldn't comprehend. Adaptation, not just survival. Evolution in real time. The first strike hit without warning. A fleet of obsidian warforms emerged from folded space above Earth's orbital plane, unleashing plasma lances that turned cities into glass craters. New York, Tokyo, Mumbai gone in blinding flashes. Billions died before the screams could echo. The Cathar assumed panic would follow. Chaos, collapse. But what they saw through their surveillance feeds defied every law of xenopsychology. In the ruins of Chicago, survivors weren't weeping. They were welding scrap metal into barricades. In the irradiated fields of Kazakhstan, farmers rerouted irrigation canals to flood enemy landing zones. In orbital stations, engineers jury-rigged decommissioned satellites into kinetic kill vehicles, slingshotting them at KTHAR dropships with terrifying precision. The aliens watched, stunned, as human medics performed field surgeries using 3D printed organs grown from stem cells in bombed-out basements. As children memorized enemy frequency bands and relayed jamming codes through cracked smartphones. As prisoners broke out of collapsed detention blocks, not to flee, but to hijack Cathar walkers and turn them against their own lines. It wasn't resistance. It was metamorphosis. Every defeat became a lesson. Every corpse, a blueprint. The Cathar tried everything. Biological weapons tailored to human DNA. Within weeks, underground labs synthesized retroviruses that not only neutralized the plague, but weaponized it against the invaders' own biosuits. Gravity pulses designed to crush bone and rupture organs? Humans responded by developing neural dampeners woven into flight suits, allowing pilots to pull maneuvers that should have turned them to paste. Even psychological warfare failed. When the hegemony broadcast images of Earth's leaders executed in chains, expecting despair, they instead ignited a global surge of encrypted broadcast songs, poems, battle hymns, flooding every surviving channel. One transmission, recorded by a dying schoolteacher in Reykjavik, became legend. You think you broke us? You just showed us how strong we really are. That message looped for months, echoing through refugee tunnels, fighter cockpits, even Cathar prisoner camps, where humans whispered it like a prayer before sabotaging their captors' life support. For 3 long years, Earth burned. But humanity didn't break. They adapted, they learned, and they remembered. Especially one-man commander Elias Voss. Once a mid-level tactical officer aboard the UNSS Resolute, he'd watched his entire fleet vaporized in the Battle of Luna. He'd crawled through the wreckage of his ship, lungs scorched by plasma fire, dragging 2 wounded crewmates across vacuum-sealed debris until rescue found him. While others focused on defense, Voss studied the enemy. Not just their tactics, their arrogance, their blind spots. The Cathar believed evolution was linear, that strength came from perfection of form. But humans? They thrived in chaos. They mutated strategies like viruses. Voss saw it clearly. The hegemony's greatest weakness wasn't their tech or their numbers. It was their inability to imagine an enemy that didn't play by rules. So he stopped playing. He vanished into the shattered infrastructure of South America, rallying remnants of special forces, rogue scientists, and civilian hackers into something new, Project Chimera. Not an army. A swarm. Decentralized. Unpredictable. They didn't build bigger guns. They built smarter ones. Nano-disassemblers disguised as pollen, drifting into Cathar ventilation systems and eating their ships from the inside out. EMP drones shaped like birds, nesting in enemy comms arrays until detonation. Most terrifying of all, they reverse-engineered Cathar neural implants, creating hybrid interfaces that let human soldiers temporarily ride, captured alien tech feeling the enemy's thoughts, anticipating their moves, turning their own reflexes against them. The Cathar began reporting nightmares, human fighters moving with impossible grace, speaking in guttural Cathari dialects, striking with surgical cruelty before vanishing into smoke. Their commanders dismissed it as stress hallucinations, until Voss struck the hegemony's flagship itself. It happened during the siege of Mars. The Cathar had turned the red planet into a fortress, mining its core for rare elements to fuel their war machine. Millions of human slaves toiled in subterranean pits, their lives measured in shifts. The hegemony believed control was absolute. Then, without warning, the entire planetary grid went dark, not from sabotage, from overload. Human prisoners had spent months rewiring fusion reactors in secret, syncing them to a single pulse. When it fired, it didn't just knock out power, it supercharged the magnetic field around Mars, turning the planet into a colossal railgun. Debris from Phobos and Deimos, pre-positioned by Chimera operatives, became hypervelocity projectiles screaming toward orbit. The Cathar fleet, caught in the sudden storm, shattered like glass. Amid the chaos, a single stealth corvette patched together from salvaged parts and painted with the ashes of fallen comrades slipped through the carnage. On board, Voss stood at the helm, eyes locked on the hegemony's command vessel, the Dread Sovereign. What followed wasn't a battle. It was vengeance made manifest. Voss didn't fire torpedoes. He fired memories. Every atrocity the Cathar had committed, every child incinerated, every city erased was encoded into a data burst, piggybacking on the ship's distress signal. When the Dread Sovereign systems tried to process the incoming transmission, it overloaded their neural network. Their AI, trained only on logic and hierarchy, couldn't parse the raw, unfiltered grief of a species pushed to extinction's edge. Alarms shrieked. Internal bulkheads sealed randomly. Life support cycled off in sections. And in the command throne room, the high strategist stared at his view screen as footage of Earth's final stand played on loop mothers shielding infants with their bodies, teenagers strapping bombs to their chests, elders singing lullabies over open comms as fire rained down. For the first time in 10,000 years, a Cathar felt something alien, horror. Not at death, but at the realization that they had created something unstoppable. Voss boarded the flagship alone. No armor, just a pulse rifle, a knife forged from a melted Cathar insignia, and the ghosts of everyone he'd lost. He moved like shadow through corridors once pristine, now slick with coolant and blood. Alien warriors met him with blades and plasma, but they fought like machines, predictable, rigid. He fought like a storm, twisting, feinting, using their own momentum against them. He didn't just kill them. He broke them, shattered their certainty. By the time he reached the throne room, the high strategist was waiting, flanked by elite guards. "You are an anomaly," the alien hissed, voice trembling with something like fear. A flaw in the cosmic order. Voss didn't answer. He raised his rifle and fired not at the strategist, but at the ceiling. The shot triggered a cascade failure in the ship's gravity core. Artificial gravity flickered, then died. In the sudden weightlessness, Voss kicked off the wall, sailing through the air like a comet. His knife found the strategist's throat before the alien could blink. As green ichor floated in globules around them, Voss leaned close. "You wanted to see how we adapt?" he whispered. "This is how." The fall of the dread sovereign marked the turning point. Without central command, the hegemony fractured. Human fleets, now flying ships cobbled from enemy wrecks and powered by stolen tech, pushed outward, system by system. But this wasn't conquest. It was liberation. Everywhere they went, they left behind more than weapons. They left hope. On conquered worlds, they taught the enslaved how to hack Cathar systems, how to grow food in toxic soil, how to fight not just with fists, but with ideas. The galaxy watched in awe as the species once deemed too chaotic to survive became the architects of a new era. And the Cathar? Those who survived fled into the dark, whispering warnings to any who would listen. Beware the humans. They do not break. They become. Years later, on a rebuilt Earth, children played in parks where skyscrapers once stood. Ships bearing the Chimera sigil patrolled the outer rim, not as conquerors, but as guardians. And high above it all, in a quiet observatory overlooking the Pacific, Elias Voss stood alone, watching the stars. He wasn't a hero. He never wanted to be. He was just a man who refused to let the light go out. Behind him, a young cadet approached, holding a datapad. "Sir," she said, voice tight with urgency. "New signals. From the Andromeda Fringe. Something big. Moving fast." Voss didn't turn. He just smiled faintly, the kind of smile that had haunted Cathar nightmares. "Then let them come," he said. "Let them watch." Because humanity had learned the hardest truth of all. Survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about being the most relentless, the most inventive, the most unwilling to accept fate. And if the universe threw another monster their way, they'd adapt, they'd endure, and they'd make sure the galaxy never forgot the price of underestimating a species that turns pain into power, loss into legacy, and horror into hope. The stars might be cold, but human hearts? They burned hotter than suns. And nothing, not empires, not extinction, not the endless dark, could ever extinguish that fire.